There comes a time in your life when people don't turn away because you've done something wrong. They turn away because, for once, you finally did something right. You start to see the world through the lens of truth, speak with sincerity, and carry the kind of wisdom forged through patience, hardship, and a deep connection with Allah. But not everyone is ready for that truth. Some would rather shatter the mirror than face what it reflects. Your growth begins to unsettle their comfort. Your clarity becomes a disruption to their confusion. And suddenly, those who once admired you feel threatened by your insight. The truth is from your Lord. So whoever wills, let him believe. And whoever wills, let him disbelieve. Surah Al-Baqarah 18:29. The wisdom Allah grants is not meant to win popularity. It's meant to raise you, not in the eyes of people, but in the sight of Allah. So let me share with you 2 essential lessons for when the light Allah placed in you becomes too overwhelming for others to accept. 1. Your clarity amplifies their confusion. When Allah grants you clarity, it doesn't just change how you think. It reshapes your entire being. Your walk becomes more purposeful. Your words carry weight. They are no longer careless but rooted in truth and guided by wisdom. Your reactions evolve. You choose patience over anger, restraint over impulsiveness. And most profoundly, the way you see the world and those around you shifts. Your heart is no longer clouded by illusion. It becomes aligned with the truth Allah has allowed you to witness. This clarity is liberating, but it can also be threatening to those still trapped in confusion. When you stop engaging in gossip, refuse to be manipulated, and choose peace over drama, you become a silent reminder of what others could have chosen but didn't. People may begin to resent you, not because you hurt them, but because your transformation highlights what they've been avoiding in themselves. You become a reflection of the healing they delay, the discipline they reject, and the faith they've neglected. Your peace makes their restlessness louder. Your focus makes their distractions feel shallow. Your strength reveals the weakness of their excuses. But understand this, it's not your fault. This is the cost of clarity. You weren't created to blend in with blindness or to please those who refuse to see. Allah gave you vision so you could lead with courage, stand firm in truth, and speak with purpose. Never dim your light to comfort others. Their discomfort is not your burden. Your only responsibility is to remain true to what Allah has shown you, and walk your path with humility and patience. 2. You're walking a path they only claim to be on. There comes a moment in your journey when your actions align with your intentions, not to impress others, but out of genuine devotion to Allah. You begin making choices based on values, not fleeting emotions. You pray, not for show, but because your soul calls for it. You guard your gaze, your tongue, and your time, not for praise, but for purpose. You stop chasing the world and start pursuing the one who created it. This is when transformation begins, from the inside out. And while you may feel proud of your progress, not everyone will celebrate it. Some people feel threatened, not because you've done wrong, but because you've become what they only pretend to be. They may speak of sincerity, but their hearts still seek attention. They may quote Qur'an and Hadith, but their intentions are tangled in ego. When they see you walking with quiet, genuine faith, not playing the game, they feel exposed. Your humility magnifies their pride. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your discipline makes their distractions obvious. And instead of support, you may face criticism. They'll say you've changed, that you've become too strict, too religious, or trying too hard, not because you've harmed them, but because your sincerity confronts their self-deception. Keep walking. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. You were not created to fit into a world of pretense. You were created to rise. Let their discomfort be a sign that your light is shining. And never apologize for that. Your sincerity disrupts their comfort. The path you're walking with true intention reveals something uncomfortable, that many people have only been standing at the entrance, talking about the journey but never truly taking a single step. But don't let their noise shake your heart. You are not responsible for their discomfort. Allah chose you, not them, to wake up. He pulled you out from the crowd so you could walk with purpose. It's not your job to make others feel better about staying behind. It's your duty to keep moving forward. And as you walk, yes, you will lose people, Some will quietly drift away. Some will push you out. Others will try to drag you back into the crowd. But remember this, when you choose the path of truth, the crowd gets smaller, but your connection with Allah grows deeper. You may feel alone, but you're not. You are being guided, protected, and elevated. While they're busy performing spirituality, you're living it. You're putting in the effort. You're checking your heart. You're correcting your intentions. And Allah sees it all. He sees what you've walked away from. He sees the silent tears, the whispered prayers, the nights you stayed up asking for guidance, and the strength it took to let go of everything that once defined you. Keep walking. Their opinions don't define your sincerity. Your steps in the dark, when no one sees but Allah, those are what truly matter. So never stop moving forward just because people are watching. They watched before and judged. They'll watch now and question. And they'll keep watching, not out of care, but because deep down they know you are becoming what they were too afraid to become. 3. Wisdom is both a gift and a test. When Allah blesses you with wisdom, it's like a light switches on inside your soul. Suddenly, confusion fades. You start to see clearly why people left, why doors closed, why your past unfolded the way it did. You no longer act on impulse. You pause, reflect, respond with calm. You begin to recognize patterns, perceive intentions, and connect dots others don't even notice. But this clarity isn't just a relief, it's a responsibility. Because when you begin to see, you can no longer pretend you don't. You can't go back to the ignorance that once felt safe. Wisdom demands more. It calls you to silence where you once spoke recklessly. It urges forgiveness where your heart aches to hold a grudge. It leads you to the higher road. Even when revenge feels easier, you start to feel the weight of every decision, every word, every look, every reaction. You think twice before you speak. You feel deeply, but you express gently. And while this depth is powerful, it also makes life heavier. People admire wisdom, but they forget the price it comes with. Wisdom is not inherited. It's earned through heartbreak, through solitude, through disappointment, through long nights spent in dua. Begging Allah for answers your heart can barely carry. And when He finally gives you that understanding, it doesn't always come with peace. First, it comes with responsibility. You learn that not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every battle is worth fighting. And sometimes the strongest response is silence. You begin to protect your peace, not out of weakness, but because you finally understand how expensive it is to lose it. And you'll notice something else. Wisdom isolates. You lose the urge to argue. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself. You become disinterested in the things that once entertained you. The rooms you once fit into start to feel too small. The conversations that once excited you now feel hollow. And the same people who once called you too emotional or too soft will now call you too distant or too quiet. But you're not becoming distant. You're becoming deliberate. You no longer waste words on ears that aren't listening. You no longer invest time in people who have no desire to grow. And this is where the real test begins. Will you stay humble in your insight? Will you guard your heart from pride? Will you continue to seek Allah, even after He has granted you clarity? Because wisdom without humility turns into arrogance, and clarity without compassion becomes cruelty. That's why when Allah grants you wisdom, He watches what you do with it. Do you guide, or do you judge? Do you uplift, or do you expose? Do you remember your own ignorance, your own mistakes, your own need for mercy? True wisdom always leads you back to Allah. It softens the heart even as it sharpens the mind. It teaches when to speak and when to stay silent. It reminds you, clarity doesn't make you better than others. It just means you have more to answer for. And the more you understand, the more humble you must become. Allah elevates you, not in front of people but in His sight. And that is the greatest success you can ever achieve. So if Allah has blessed you with wisdom, carry it with care. Don't rush to speak just because you understand. Don't force others to see what you now see. Plant seeds with gentleness. Walk with quiet strength. Remember, This gift wasn't given to make you feel superior. It was given so you could serve, guide, and walk the path of truth with humility and grace. For they can't control what they don't understand. When you were easy to read, easy to please, and easy to influence, you fit in. You went along with the crowd. You laughed at jokes that felt wrong. You said yes when your heart was screaming no. You followed paths that pulled you further from Allah, because fitting in felt safer than standing out. And people liked that version of you, the version that was predictable, that didn't question, that didn't shine too brightly, because that version was easy to control. But then, something shifted. You started to wake up. You began to ask hard questions, the kind that made others uncomfortable. You learned to say no without guilt. You began guarding your energy, your heart, your peace. You stopped reacting to every little thing. You became intentional. You chose prayer over performance. You found stillness in solitude and purpose in your steps. And suddenly, people who once felt powerful around you felt nervous. Why? Because they no longer knew how to control you. Control depends on predictability. It feeds off fear, guilt, insecurity, and emotional dependence. But when you rooted yourself in Allah, you stopped needing validation from people. You stopped bending to please. You stopped being emotionally available for manipulation. And when people realize they can no longer play with your emotions, they begin to feel powerless. Not because you've turned cruel, but because you've grown into someone who can't be controlled. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not distant. You're discerning. You're not arrogant. You're anchored. And that kind of inner strength terrifies those who need others to stay small so they can feel big. When you stop reacting from emotion, they lose their grip. When you respond with calm instead of defensiveness, their strategies fail. When you stand firm in chaos, you become unpredictable. And when you're unpredictable, you're uncontrollable. Because now you're driven by purpose, not emotions. You're fueled by submission, not attention. You care less about what people think and more about what Allah sees. This is why spiritual growth often leads to tension. Not because you've become toxic, but because you're no longer playing a role designed to keep others comfortable. You're not engaging in gossip. You're not chasing trends. You're not laughing just to be liked. And for people who rely on control, this is terrifying. They only knew how to handle the version of you that was confused, dependent, and easily influenced. But once Allah becomes your anchor, everything changes. Their control breaks. Their games stop working. Their manipulation loses power. And here's the hard truth. This doesn't just happen with enemies. Sometimes the most threatened are the ones closest to you. Friends, family, even those who once cheered you on. They might accuse you of changing, of thinking you're better, of pulling away. But what they're really feeling is fear. Fear that you've grown beyond their reach. Fear that you're moving in a direction they're unwilling to follow. But hear this clearly. Do not shrink to make others feel safe. Do not dim your light just to be accepted. Do not trade your growth for their comfort. Because the strength you now carry is a sign of Allah's mercy. He is building you into someone solid, stable, and spiritually grounded. And with that strength comes a question. Will you stand in it, or will you shrink back to be liked again? The most threatening thing to people who rely on control is someone who has made Allah their foundation, because that kind of person doesn't waver with the wind. They don't collapse under pressure. They don't need applause to move forward. They are rooted, focused, clear, and above all free. So stay firm. You don't need to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to soften your strength to ease someone else's insecurity. Walk with your head high, your heart clean, and your intentions pure. Because they cannot control what they don't understand. And they will never understand a heart that is fully surrendered to Allah. 5. Truth feels like arrogance to the insecure. There's something strange that happens when you start speaking truth from a place of clarity. Even when your words are calm, sincere, and grounded in experience, some will still label you arrogant. Not because your message is harmful, but because your tone unsettles their insecurity. They've become so accustomed to sugar-coated lies, to diluted truths, to silence disguised as politeness, that when someone finally speaks with certainty, it feels like a personal attack. Even if the words weren't aimed at them, you start to notice it. You express a boundary, they accuse you of thinking you're better. You choose not to argue, they call you proud. You walk away from sin, they claim you're judgmental. But what they don't understand is this: you're not speaking from pride. You're speaking from pain, from healing, from lessons learned through hardship. You didn't just wake up one day full of strength. You were broken. You were humbled. You were shattered in secret, and then rebuilt by Allah piece by piece. What they see as arrogance is actually the quiet confidence that comes from surviving what was meant to destroy you. But the insecure heart doesn't recognize that. To them, your firmness feels like superiority. Your clarity feels like criticism. Your growth becomes a silent threat to their comfort. Instead of asking themselves why your presence stings, they make you the problem. They twist your intentions. They mock your growth. They write stories in their minds where you're the villain, not because you've wronged them, but because you remind them of what they could be if they chose to grow. But don't let that silence your truth. Don't shrink to make them feel tall. Don't dull your light to protect their shadows. Don't bury your wisdom so others can stay comfortable in ignorance. Allah gave you your voice for a reason. He didn't heal you so you could hide. He didn't guide you just so you could blend in. He raised you to be seen, to speak, to lead, not as an example of perfection, but of transformation. Yes, you will constantly walk the fine line between confidence and humility. You'll have to check your intentions often. You'll need to guard your heart from pride, even as others accuse you of having one. That's the real test. Can you stay sincere while being misunderstood? Can you stay kind when kindness is mistaken for weakness? Can you keep speaking the truth, even when it costs you relationships? Because true strength doesn't shout. It doesn't seek applause. It simply lives. And real sincerity doesn't need to be explained to those who are unwilling to understand. Even the Prophet Muhammad was accused of being a liar, a magician, a madman, not because he lacked sincerity, but because his truth was too heavy for some hearts to carry. And you are not greater than him. If they misunderstood him, they will misunderstand you too. But remember this always: Allah knows the hearts. He sees beyond the accusations. He knows your intention when you speak, and your sincerity when you act. And if He is pleased with you, the opinions of people carry no weight. So keep speaking the truth, softly, lovingly, unapologetically. Your words may unsettle the insecure, but for someone out there, your voice is the rope they were praying for. Your truth might be the sign someone asked Allah to send. And that is reason enough to never let fear silence your light. 6. Wisdom is lonely but never empty. There is a hidden cost to seeing the world clearly. The more wisdom Allah grants you, the more you notice what others miss. You see through fake smiles. You sense tension in a room before a word is spoken. You feel dishonesty, not through what's said, but through what's left unsaid. You recognize the patterns others try to hide. You sense the pain behind the laughter. You catch the disconnection masked as confidence. And while this depth makes you wiser, it also makes life lonelier. Because the more you understand people, the more you realize how much remains hidden behind smiles and surface talk. You no longer enjoy shallow conversations. You no longer have the energy to pretend. You crave what's real: depth, sincerity, truth. But the world often offers only noise, distraction, and pretense. So, without even trying, you begin to detach. You speak less. You observe more. You retreat. Not because you're avoiding others, but because you're protecting your soul. And in that retreat, you discover something unexpected: silence that heals, solitude that soothes, distance that reveals. It's in that quiet space that you begin to meet your truest self, the version that doesn't perform for attention, that doesn't crave approval, that sits quietly with Allah even when the world feels far away. And though this version of you walks alone at times, it is not empty. It's full of clarity, full of conviction, full of connection with the one who matters most. you begin to understand loneliness isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's a protection. Sometimes it's a gift. 7. Wisdom may isolate you, but it will never abandon you. Sometimes the loneliness you're feeling isn't punishment. It's an invitation to disconnect from the noise of the world so you can reconnect with the one who created your soul. Yes, wisdom often isolates, but not because you're broken. It isolates because you're healing, because you're no longer dependent on the noise of the crowd, and you're finally learning to be content in your own company. More importantly, you're learning to be content with the presence of Allah. That's why your solitude no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like sanctuary, a sacred space where no voices interrupt, no judgment lingers, and peace flows freely between you and your Lord. But here lies the test. Can you embrace this season of quiet without resentment? Can you sit in stillness without racing back to distraction? Can you let go of those who walked away without chasing after their shadows? Because the truth is, not everyone is meant to go where Allah is leading you. Not everyone can carry the weight of the wisdom you've been given. Some people were part of your past, not your purpose. And the more you grow, the more you'll outgrow. But don't fear the shedding. Don't fear the narrowing of your circle. Don't mistake solitude for abandonment. Allah is never absent from the one who remembers him. If your journey has brought you to a place where it's just you, your heart, your tears, and your dua, then know with certainty you are exactly where you're meant to be, because it's in those quiet moments that your connection with Allah deepens. It's there your heart is prepared for the mission He has chosen for you. Wisdom is not about knowing everything. It's about trusting the one who does. It's about seeing clearly and still choosing compassion. It's about being strong enough to walk alone without feeling lonely, because you know you're never truly alone. In every silent step, in every unspoken prayer, in every tear shed behind closed doors, Allah is near, closer than your breath, closer than your pain, closer than the people who left. Yes, wisdom may be lonely, but it is never empty. It is full of meaning, full of purpose, full of Allah's quiet guidance shaping your soul. So don't run from this solitude. Embrace it, grow in it, let it refine you, even if no one walks beside you. Because once Allah places wisdom in your heart, you're never the same again. You start to see differently. You hear what others miss. You feel more deeply. You speak more gently. And you move through the world with a sense of purpose that confuses the crowd. But with that gift comes a responsibility. And yes, a loneliness that not everyone will understand. They will misread your silence as arrogance. They'll interpret your boundaries as rejection. They'll resent your clarity because it reflects what they're still avoiding. And when your soul grows too heavy for shallow conversations and surface-level company, the world will call you too much, too quiet, or too serious. But remember, you were never created for their approval. You will outgrow friendships that once felt like home. You'll walk away from spaces that once defined your days. Your spirit will start rejecting what it once tolerated without question. That's not pride. That's purification. That's not coldness. That's clarity. And even if the world doesn't understand it, your Lord does. He sees the nights you endure in silence. He hears the whispered prayers you can't say out loud. He knows the strength it takes to stay silent when your heart wants to scream. And He rewards that kind of restraint in ways the world could never comprehend. So let them whisper. Let them misunderstand. Let them go. Your job is not to be understood. Your job is to be sincere, to be obedient, to be rooted. Allah did not give you wisdom so you could show off. He gave it to you so you could show up, to be a light in the dark, to speak when silence becomes betrayal, to stay silent when anger would destroy, to walk away when staying would cost you your soul. And yes, that might make you the villain in someone else's story, but so be it. You were not made to play a role in their illusion. You were created to live your truth. And the truth is this: when Allah opens your eyes, you can never return to blindness. When He removes you from distraction, you'll never find peace in noise again. When He places wisdom in your heart, it becomes your compass, even if the world tries to drag you in another direction. So hold on to it, protect it, nourish it, and never apologize for it, because the wisdom that unsettles others is the very sign that Allah is drawing you closer to Him. And that journey is worth everything, even if it costs you everything else. In the end, the people who left were never meant to carry your calling. The confusion around you is just proof of the clarity within you. And the loneliness you feel, that's not emptiness. It's space that Allah Himself has cleared, so He can fill it with His presence. So stay rooted, stay silent, stay sincere. They may not understand the weight of your wisdom, but you were always meant to carry it.